Now, protests have erupted in Ukraine after President Zelensky sacked his popular defence minister, Mykhailo Fedorov, just 6 months into the job. Fedorov was dismissed despite his success in really taking the war to Russia. Have a listen to protesters chanting, "We do care" in Kyiv, and speaking to the Kyiv Independent.
He's a great minister, and we're all here to support him and to support our country, first of all. He's been doing great things for our country. We've been advancing in the war, so that's why his dismissal is the worst decision that could have happened right now.
Well, we can speak to Jimmy Rushton, special correspondent for the Kyiv Independent. Morning from us, Jimmy.
Morning.
Good to speak to you. So why has he been sacked?
That's a very difficult question, and it's a question that most Ukrainians are currently grappling with. As you said, this is a man who has been very successful in his role. He's widely considered to bring a sense of optimism back to the Ukrainian society and the Ukrainian military with some of his decisions and some of the policy changes he's made. And it does seem like Zelensky has made a very, very poor choice. Many suspect it was because he was challenging entrenched interests in the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense or potentially becoming too popular. But whatever the reasoning, it's a very strange decision, and it's one that has left Ukrainians scratching their heads.
Yeah, and I do find it fascinating, the protests that have taken place, not just in Kyiv, but elsewhere as well, because, as we observe, it's not often that people will take to the streets in defence of a government minister.
So essentially, you have to remember that everything here is viewed through the prism of the war. Yeah. And he was a person that gave Ukrainians, again, optimism, hope, the feeling that they could actually win the war or at least enter negotiations in a position of strength. And for some reason, Zelensky has made this decision to remove this incredibly effective, incredibly popular figure. And right now, the Ukrainian parliament, the Rada, has gone on recess without appointing a replacement. Also not appointing a replacement foreign minister because everyone was sacked during this reshuffle. So we're waiting until August 18th during a full-scale war with no defence minister and no foreign minister. It's an absurd situation.
It is absurd. You're absolutely right. He said on his in comments about the protest, Ukrainians can sense when decisions are no longer being made based on the values this country stands for. That is the sentiment of the former defence minister after these protests. And I suppose he is getting at what? That the wartime kind of trajectory or strategy is being compromised. Is there a real concern about the direction that Zelensky is setting here?
I think there is, and I think one of the big concerns is that he's chosen the entrenched interests in the Ministry of Defence, embodied by very controversial Commander-in-Chief, Alexander Syrsky, who's very much a figure of the old Soviet Guard, favours these quite unsophisticated brute force style assaults on the front line, whereas Fedorov is this technocratic figure, favours technology, favours fighting asymmetrically. And it's really, I think, a combination of these factors that you have this reforming figure that's challenging corruption, then you have these entrenched interests. And Ukrainians don't want they don't want the Soviet view to prevail. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these protests on the streets here.
Is there an alternative argument here, and some of this originates from sources within the Ukrainian government, that Fedorov was sacked because he didn't reform mobilisation, that actually there have been a huge number, hundreds of thousands of desertions, millions dodging the draft? Is there something in there that is an indictment of his management?
No, that's completely false. Firstly, he doesn't have the ability to make the reforms that they're claiming. The reforms would need to be made through the Ukrainian General Staff, which is controlled by Syrsky and ultimately President Zelensky. He has been trying to make some reforms to the mobilization program, but it's fundamentally one of the biggest problems with mobilization is a lot of the Ukrainian men who are scared of mobilization know that they will be sent to one of Syrsky's assault regiments, which take the predominant allocation of mobilized guys at this point. And he is very controversial. There have been some significant scandals with these assault regiments run by Syrsky, and a lot of people are scared. And again, this comes back to the difference in approaches. You have, on one hand, a very Soviet mentality with Syrsky, and on the other hand, you have the reforming technocratic approach from Fedorov. And I think, again, we've seen the Soviet approach be favoured or win out in this battle from Zelensky.
It's fascinating that idea of this kind of traditional military establishment kind of trying to kill off the digital, modern take and modern reforms. What is at the root of that? What is that? Is that about personal gain, personal ambitions? Is it a lack of understanding about what reform actually means in the context of war?
I think it's a bit of everything. I think you have to remember that there are people that have been in the Ukrainian military literally for decades, and they don't like it when their authority and their positions are being challenged by someone who is 35, who doesn't have military experience. But then again, the position of defense minister is a civilian one. It's not supposed to be held by a military officer for very, very good reason. I think there is an element of natural friction, but you will always have friction when someone comes in and tries to reform something like the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. And that's what it needs. It desperately needs reform. The Ukrainian military desperately needs reform. And that's what Fedorov was trying to do. Yeah.
Is Zelensky losing control of his own political coalition?
I think that's too early to say, but I think this is an incredibly poor decision. It's gone down incredibly poorly with his own faction in the Rada. It's gone down poorly with Ukrainian civil society and the Ukrainian military. I haven't met anyone that likes this decision, that even understands this decision. It would have been viewed as incomprehensible a week ago if he told Ukrainians that Fedorov was going to be replaced. They just simply wouldn't understand it, and they still don't understand it.
Jimmy, thanks very much for your reporting this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That is Jimmy Rushton, special correspondent for the Kyiv Independent. The crisis then was really erupting as the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was visiting Kyiv, which is, I suppose, difficult for him, but more than that, is difficult for the Ukrainian presidency, given that there is this internal government chaos while you're standing next to your primary and now indeed award-winning European backer. And just a note as well, as you might imagine, that in Russia, state media and pro-Kremlin bloggers are all gloating about the crisis, calling Fedorov's departure as a rebellion against Zelensky. So there is something of a psychological victory in sort of propaganda and PR terms for Russia.
Well, absolutely, as we were hearing earlier from Tom Noonan on Early Breakfast with one of the opposition leaders.
There are photos in the paper of Sir Keir Starmer visiting Kyiv for the last time as Prime Minister. While he was there, though, thousands of Ukrainians joined anti-corruption protests against Volodymyr Zelensky, who sacked his Defence Minister, Mykhailo Fedorov, after only 6 months in the job because Fedorov had been clashing with army chiefs. Tatiana Shevchuk is head of international relations at the Ukrainian NGO, the Anti-Corruption Action Centre. She joins us now. Tatiana, good morning.
Good morning.
What are your concerns then about this decision? Why have you been protesting?
So the concern is that when we finally had some kind of breakthrough in this war, the situation started to change on the battlefield because of the right decisions, because the military finally embraced the necessary reforms. Those reforms are abruptly stopped, and there is a feeling that this hope of getting the victory, we are losing this hope, and that the situation is going the wrong way. So this protest is a gesture of the people to show the president and the government that we don't agree with such actions, and we want continuation of those reforms in the military sphere.